Krishna 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 Hare Krishna 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 Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
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 Om Surabhyay Namaha
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 Mukham karoti vasalam tvangum langayate girim Yat kripatamaham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam Yat kripatamaham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam Hare Krishna. Welcome to our Bhagavatam class. I think we have a newcomer today.
Sankalp.
Huh?
From Delhi, Sankalp.
Yes, Hare Krishna. Welcome. Special welcome to those who are newly coming. So we are continuing from Canto number 1, Chapter 2, entitled Divinity and Divine Service. Let's see here. Text number 11.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
This chapter has many very important texts. This is one of them. Vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yaj jnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavan iti shabdyate Vadanti tat tattvavidas Tattvam yajnanamadvayam Brahmeti paramatmeti Bhagavan iti shabdyate Vadanti tat tattvavidas Tattvam yajnanamadvayam Brahmeti paramatmeti Bhagavan iti shabdyate Vadanti tat tattvavidas Tattvam yajnanamadvayam Brahmeti paramatmeti Bhagavan iti shabdyate Vadanti, they say, tat, that, tattvavidaha, the learned souls, tattvam, the absolute truth, yat, which, jnanam, knowledge, advayam, non-dual, Brahma iti, known as Brahman, Paramatma iti, known as Paramatma, Bhagavan iti, known as Bhagavan, Shabdyate, it so sounded. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai.
Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. Kindly repeat after me. Learned transcendentalists
learned transcendentalists
who know the absolute truth,
who know the absolute truth,
call the non-dual substance
call this non-dual substance
Brahman,
Brahman,
Paramatma,
Paramatma,
or Bhagavan.
or Bhagavan.
Purport. The absolute truth is both subject and object, and there is no qualitative difference there. Therefore, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are qualitatively one and the same. The same substance is realized as impersonal Brahman by the students of the Upanishads, as localized Paramatma by the Hiranyagarbhas, or the yogis, and as Bhagavan by the devotees. In other words, Bhagavan, or the personality of Godhead, is the last word of the absolute truth. Paramatma is the partial representation of the personality of Godhead, and impersonal Brahman is the glowing effulgence of the personality of Godhead, as the sun rays are to the sun god. Less intelligent students of either of the above schools sometimes argue in favor of their own respective realization. But those who are perfect seers of the absolute truth know well that the above three features of the one absolute truth are different perspective views seen. Both the knower and the known are one and the same thing. In the relative world, the knower is a living spirit or superior energy, whereas the known is inert matter or inferior energy. Therefore, there is a duality of inferior and superior energy, whereas in the absolute realm, both the knower and the known are of the same superior energy. There are three kinds of energies of the supreme energetic. There is no difference between the energy and energetic, but there is a difference of quality of energies. Now, the absolute realm and the living entities are of the same superior energy, but the material world is inferior energy. The living being in contact with the inferior energy is illusion, thinking he belongs to the inferior energy. Therefore, there is the sense of relativity in the material world. In the absolute, there is no such sense of difference between the knower and the known, and therefore everything there is absolute. Translation again. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. So, of course, as we mentioned, this is one of the key verses whereby it is clearly explained the different levels of understanding or realization of the Absolute, as explained in the verse and also in the purport. The interesting point, which is being nicely explained here, is that in the absolute realm there is no difference between the knower and the known. This requires a little bit of thinking. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks about Kshetra and Kshetragya. Kshetra is the body. Kshetra is the material energy. And Kshetragya is that living entity within the body, isn't it? But in the spiritual world, it's not like that. The Kshetra and the Kshetragya is the same. Yeah. The living entity, the spirit self, the spiritual self, in the spiritual world, like Krishna, Krishna is always in his eternal, absolute energy as transcendental living entity who never, even when he comes in contact with the material world, when he descends in the material world, remains completely transcendental. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, avajananti mam mudha manushim prakritim. Yes, those who consider that I have assumed an ordinary material body, they are misunderstanding. Avajananti mamudha manushim tanumasritam param bhavam janantu mama bhuta maheswaram. Therefore only Krishna is referred to as the Maha Ishvara. He is controlling all energies. He is the source of all energies. So this is nicely explained here in the purport by Srila Prabhupada. Our problem is that we're dealing with two realities. The spiritual reality, whom we are, the spirit soul, but we have this body, and we falsely identify with this body. And actually that is the root cause of all living entities in the material world. It is the most subtle and most difficult aspect to uproot. That is the ahankar. The ahankar. And again in the second chapter, since we have the Bhagavad Gita here, in the at the very end of the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, is nicely explained by both in the text and also by Srila Prabhupada, how it's right here. Yes. How can one, because ultimately everyone wants to be happy, everyone wants to be peaceful. So here, this verse is nicely explaining how one can actually attain real peace. Vihaya kamam yasarvam pumsam charati nispriya nirmamo nirahankara sashantim adhigachyati. A person who has given up four things. Four is easy to remember. It's just only on one hand. You have more, then it becomes complicated. So four things need to be given up. for one to actually attain a real peace. Number one has to give up desires for sense gratification. Desires for sense gratification, because we have this body, therefore this very, very strong desire that Krishna also explains. Arjuna was asking, what is it that impels us? And that's in the 3rd chapter. Kama esha, krodha esha. It is kama, it is lust, because of this body, because of our identification with the body. Actually, not because of the body, but because of our identification with the body. Because there are transcendentalists, that is the goal, although they still have this body, but they don't identify with the body. So they don't have any problem with lust, isn't it? They don't have any problem with sense gratification because their consciousness is above, yeah. So this is the first thing, giving up all desires for sense gratification. Number 2, one who lives free from desires. That means above the bodily, let's say, gross sense gratification, there is also subtle sense gratification. Just like Prabhupada would explain, sex life is not only engaging in sexual intercourse. Sex life is also there in in the more subtle level of wanting adoration and recognition and prestige. That is subtle sex life, subtle sex life, actually. So it is not that simply by following this particular principle of the 4 principles, avoiding illicit sex life, it is not that simply by not having sex life that we are free from sex life. We may still nurture and cultivate, of course, and if we do that, eventually we will engage in sex life as well. So the first level is avoiding to engage physically or with this gross body in all kinds of activities of sense gratification, the culmination of which, or the strongest attraction being actual sex life. And then the second to avoid is on the more subtle level. So we have these 2 bodies, the gross material body and the subtle material body. So I'm sure you've heard the expression, which is, if someone has not heard it before, is a little startling when we hear it. I think most of you have heard it. It's called die before you die. Die before you die means give up all your mental desires on the subtle mental platform. You see, we cannot leave this body before we die. But we can leave our mental, let's say, material desires on the mental platform. We can actually, and we need to do that, we can actually live our lives in such a way by taking to Krishna consciousness, by applying these instructions in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, where we actually nullify, where we completely put an end to our material desires, where we actually have our subtle body in terms of the material mind, material intelligence, and especially that will be coming here also, the ahankara. We can put an end, and actually until we do put an end to our false ego, to our material desires, both gross and subtle, then we remain entangled. So the first, again, all desires of sense gratification. Number 2, all kinds of other desires. And number 3, very interesting, one who has given up all sense of proprietorship. we all have that disease, being embodied of identifying with our body, identifying with our family, with our nation, etc., and of trying to control and master what is that we are, what we survey. So that is the third. And the fourth is one who is devoid of false ego. And that is the most difficult. It's easy enough actually to stop sex life. And of course in the beginning one is trained to regulate sex life. Of course, brahmachari life, regulation of sex life means no sex life, isn't it? In brahmacharya life, regulation of sex life is recommended within the grihastha ashram. And that regulation of sex life means having children or having sex life rather, for the purpose of begetting Krishna conscious children. That is the recommended, let's say, regulation in the grihastha ashram. That means that actually 3/4 brahmachari ashram, vanaprastha ashram, and sannyas ashram are meant to completely disassociate with sex life. So the concession is given in the grihastha ashram. So all of this to explain that we cannot fully establish our relationship with this highest realm of the absolute truth, even with the other realms. Highest realm, of course, being Bhagavan realization, but even just like in the Bhagavad Gita, na sochati na kanchati, one who brahmabhuta prasanatma, to attain that platform or level of being totally transcending this material body, even though we may not realize the Paramatma or Bhagavan feature, it will bring us to a certain level. On the gross platform, na sochati na kanchati, we will not have anxieties. But there is still a danger. Still danger means until and unless we come to that Bhagavan platform, Bhagavan realization, just like even though one may become Brahman realized, until and unless he goes beyond that, he will still remain connected with the material world. One may be elevated or may be merging into the Brahmajyoti, but that is not a permanent position. Our only safe and secure position is to come to that platform of Bhagavan realization, where we again re-establish our long lost relationship with Krishna, and where we revive our spiritual senses. Until we revive our spiritual senses, we will be forced to act on the platform of our material senses, on the platform of our material mind, on the platform of our material intelligence. And this comes up many times, of course, throughout the Bhagavad Gita especially, that Krishna consciousness means coming to that platform of transcendental intelligence. Now we are mostly dealing with material intelligence, material mind. But by the practice recommended in the Vedic literatures, especially Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, we can begin to practice above the material body, and then as we become adept in doing that, as we become purified, then our chances of not remaining in the material world increase. We will. The more we are fixed, the more we become fixed in Krishna consciousness, the more we operate, function on the transcendental platform, then that also Krishna nicely is explaining regarding, it all has to do with energies actually. When we take shelter of the Daivi Prakriti, then we become protected by this divine energy. Because we no longer identify ourselves with this material body. We know ourselves and we act on that platform of the spirit soul. It generally does not happen overnight, although it can. But generally it does not. But Prabhupada would say it's a question of how much we actually surrender to the process, to what we are hearing. I will read this again. It's better sitting here than there, isn't it? But don't complain. One or two drops might become. So this is, text number 11. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call the non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. And so we should meditate on this point that Prabhupada is making in a purport regarding the knower and the known. On the transcendental spiritual realm, platform, or in the spiritual world, because there's nothing material, so the living entity, there's no difference between the living entity and the spiritual body, just like Krishna also. There's no difference between Krishna as an individual and his body. Of course, until we go back to the spiritual world, we will not be able to fully understand that. Or we can understand it even before going back to the spiritual world if we become fully self-realized. Yeah. Krishna is very kind. He's sending AC to everyone. Free AC. There's a little warm today. So any thoughts or questions or objections? No one asking any questions? It's on or not on?
On, no question.
Okay, no question. Okay, one question from the back.
You mentioned that we need to revive our transcendental senses.
We need to revive our transcendental senses. Yes.
Until then, we generally act on all material senses.
And until we do that, we act on the material senses. Yes.
So as knowing this, we start doubting ourselves. Like whatever ideas come to our mind, whatever action we want to take, knowing that it is out of material mind level, we start doubting ourselves to that extent that we lose all kind of confidence in ourselves. in the process of bhakti,
In the process of bhakti, we should be increasing confidence, not reducing our confidence.
how to overcome
If we nicely, properly apply the process of bhakti as recommended in the Shastra, as recommended and explained by our acharyas, then we will not get lost. Rather, the opposite will happen. So we must look at, each and every one of us, we must look at our situation. We must be introspective. And sometimes, because the material world is a bewildering place, Maya is very strong, sometimes we may not be able to analyze or understand by ourselves. Then we can, or should, approach those who are senior, and then we can get a more clear understanding. But Krishna consciousness is such that, generally speaking, the knowledge we are receiving, the knowledge we are cultivating, if we actually cultivate this knowledge, is sufficient to clear whatever doubts may come our way. We have, in other words, the necessary tools, the necessary instruments, the necessary knowledge in these literatures to deal with the various challenges that the material world presents. And therefore, I would say that to a large extent, when we experience various difficulties, generally it is because we have not sufficiently or properly applied the process. Anyone, it's just like, if you have a good physician, and if he's giving you the right medicine, if he's a good physician, he'll give you the right medicine and the right diet. We simply have to follow that. And if we follow that in due course of time, we get healthy, isn't it? So in the same way, the spiritual physician, the acharyas, the spiritual master, they give us guidelines as to how to live our lives, what activities to take up, all the things that we hear and that we know. And the more we put these into practice, then let's say it is built in. By following these instructions, we will actually, like the sick person taking his medicine and diet, we will also get well. But it doesn't mean that, we can and should also consult at times, but generally, most of us need to make more of an effort to hear more attentively and to put into practice what we are hearing, basically. Yes.
How we can know that whether we are using spiritual intelligence or material intelligence?
How can we know whether we are using spiritual intelligence or material intelligence? Look at the results. If one is, it's like in the material world, the materialists, they're using they have material intelligence. Some of them are very intelligent, but they're misusing that intelligence to further their activities of sense gratification, to further their entanglement ultimately in the material world. So Prabhupada would explain that our test, whether we are actually advancing or progressing in Krishna consciousness, is how we actually become detached from this material world, how we become detached from activities of sense gratification, how we become detached from, as mentioned here in the verse I was quoting at the end of the second chapter, how we actually come to understand that we are servants and not masters, and therefore we don't try to lord it over either others or the material energy. And another indication is how we are actually experiencing, as Krishna also explained in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, how we are actually experiencing transcendental happiness. You know, the process of devotional service is meant to make us very peaceful and to actually experience transcendental happiness, not being afflicted or disturbed by whatever may take place. And so many things that are cause of disturbance take place to all of us. So we need to look at the effect or the consequences of our use of intelligence. If by our intelligence we are becoming more detached, more engaged in Krishna consciousness, then that's a good use of intelligence. And the opposite means a misuse, means we are still on the platform of the material intelligence. Huh?
One question is,
Yes.
explain die before die.
The question is, what does it mean, die before you die?
Yes.
Is it? Yeah. So very, very briefly, die before you die means that Bhagavad Gita teaches that we have 3 levels of bodies. Actually, within us we have 4 bodies. There's more bodies actually, but there's 4 main bodies. Now, some people when they hear this, they become a little confused and scared. What do you mean? I have 4 bodies. So we all know that we all have the gross body, what we see in the mirror, what we can touch. Body made of 5 elements, the gross body. Then we have another body that we cannot see, and that is referred to as the astral body, or the subtle body. This is all explained in the Bhagavad Gita, made of mind, intelligence, and ego, isn't it? Then, of course, above these 2 levels of material, one is gross material body, the other is subtle material body. Above these 2 levels of material bodies, we have the spirit soul. We are that spirit soul. And in addition to the spirit soul being in this body, there's also the Paramatma. You could say the 4th body. Krishna as Paramatma is also within our body. And then, depending on healthy or how unhealthy we are, we may have many other bodies within, other living entities, germs, etc. and whatnot. So die before you die refers to the subtle body. Because the subtle body, the 3 activities of the mind are thinking, feeling, and willing. Thinking, feeling, willing. When we think, feel, and will in relation to the body, then we remain in this material world. We actually increase our entanglement. But when we transfer this thinking, feeling, and willing to spiritual subject matters for the service of Krishna, then that mind, and also that material mind, and that material intelligence, and that material ego, what we call ahankara or false ego, actually will gradually no longer be there, to the point of actually no longer having. Die before you die means no longer having any kind of material desires, no longer having any kind of material attachment. Because at the moment of death, this body dies, but our mind does not die. The subtle body does not die. The subtle body carries the spirit soul into another body. This is all explained, of course, in the Bhagavad Gita. So if we still have material desires, material attachments, we are forced by the law of nature to go into another body, into another womb, you see. But if we no longer have material desires, no longer material thoughts, material attachments, and if we are fixed on Krishna, if we know about Krishna, then we go back to Krishna. So therefore, for a devotee, die before you die means simply giving up, gradually giving up all thoughts, desires, and attachments related to the material world, related to the material body. That is the simple meaning of die before you die. Yeah. That is our problem actually, because this subtle body is still active. Even one small desire, Prabhupada explains, even if we have a small desire, we must come back to fulfill that desire. Yeah. Even if we have, if we engage in activities that will create either good or bad karma, we have to come back to live out this good or bad karma. Therefore, a devotee, again, that is very clearly explained in the Bhagavad Gita, he engages in what is called akarma, nice karma. He engages in activities, but that don't create karmic reaction. Yeah, nice karma. I think we need to close here for now, since some of it are getting wet. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki. Rameshwar Prabhu? Where is the magic box? I have in my room. I hope this is not a sign of the early monsoon. It would be much too early. Well, you know. Huh? Last year like this. Is it? Once or twice. Yeah. Will not stay. Well, it's especially important for people who are engaging in making houses made of mud. Mud and water